The Golden Hour Birth Podcast, a podcast about real birth stories and creating connections through our shared experiences.
Childbirth isn't just about the child. It's about the person who gave birth, their lives, their wisdom, and their empowerment.
We're Liz
and Natalie,
the Golden Hour Birth Podcast, and we're here to laugh with you,
cry with you,
and hold space for you. Welcome to the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. I am your co-host, Liz.
And I'm your co-host, Natalie. And tonight we have Shawna on from California. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Shawna.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Us too. So if you want to go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah. So I'm in Morro Bay, California. It's actually the town that I was raised in. I have one son that I birthed, and I am with somebody who also has a son, and our boys are 13 days apart in age.
Wow, that's so cute.
I know, it's so cute. So they were both born in February 2021. We have this Brady Bunch kind of situation. I call them my spirit twins. My son's name is Leonardo. I call him Leo. And then his boy is Trey. And we are both 50-50 co-parents with the others. And they live locally. So we split weeks. You know, our boys are like 2 years and some change. They were born February 2021. So yeah, we're both like, you know, kind of parents of young kids. And we're both entrepreneurs actually, and so is my child's father. So we're just kind of making it work at this point and building our businesses when we don't have our children. And yeah, I'm finally in a place where I'm like really loving motherhood. But postpartum was really rough for me. So which I know we'll get into.
Yeah. So what was finding out that you were pregnant, and what was your pregnancy like?
Yeah. So me and my ex, we were engaged to get married. We got engaged in February 2020, and the kind of like game plan was, you know, we'll get married February 2021, and then we'll try to get pregnant after that. And then of course, like the world shut down in March. And, you know, it was just like, I was 34. I think I was 34 at the time. Yeah, I was 34 at the time. So it's kind of that like feeling of like, yeah, I have time, but also I'm down, you know? And and actually before getting together with my ex, I really was not envisioning myself having kids in this lifetime. And when we got together and fell in love, his vision of his life was very clear that he wanted to have kids. And what that did for me was really look at what was in the way of me saying yes to motherhood. And really if that was what I wanted, you know? And I'm a life coach. And so I have a lot of life coaching colleagues. And so I started having this conversation about like, you know, what's the narrative? Like, what are the stories around motherhood that I'm, you know, fearful of? And so anyway, the whole thing was like a very intentional process by, you know, like I said, March 2020, all that went down. And I was just like, I think it was May. I was like, you know, I'm down. Like, why don't we just start trying? I think I read on the internet that like, you know, it takes couples an average of like 3 months to a year to get pregnant for the first time. And honestly, deep down, I knew I was fertile AF because I have like, you know, big Italian family, big Irish family, like I do booty shaking fitness classes for a living. So I'm very like in tune with like my Shakti and like sexual energy. And anyway, it went as I predicted. I literally got pregnant that month. I knew when I was ovulating, and so like 2 weeks later, I like woke up and my tits were like, bum, bum, and I was like, oh, that's different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's different. So I knew before the pregnancy test told us, and still when we got that pregnancy test, like all the fears like came up for me.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, I had a really free and wild 20s experience. I traveled a bunch. I loved going out. I'm like I'm less of an extrovert nowadays, but I was like one of those super extroverts in my heyday, And so I remember thinking like, oh, I'm so grateful that I'm not 25. And also I don't think there's anything wrong or bad about having kids earlier. Like so much has shifted for me. But anyway, we got pregnant right away. I definitely had those like mixed feelings and like, oh shit, this is real. And I guess we're doing this. And I had a really wonderful pregnancy. I decided years ago that I was going to have a home birth. I watched The Business of Being Born like back in 2008 or 2009.
Yes.
And I was like, thank you,
That's
Ricky
our
Lake.
movie. Yes.
I like, thank you, Ricky Lake.
Yes, literally.
And I also at the time I remember meeting a woman who I lived in Hawaii. I went to college in Hawaii, and she had a home birth, and she was just talking to me about how she was like, yeah, I just was like walking on Sunset Beach, like squatting, like through my contractions. And I was like, yeah, like it just made so much sense to me. So that was very clear that, that's what I wanted. It didn't, and then I showed my ex The Business of Being Born, and he was like, yep, done. Okay, cool. And we found, I did want a midwife. I actually really wasn't that familiar with like the free birth movement, at all, but until I was pregnant. And then I started listening to the Free Birth Society podcast, and, that was like a whole other world that opened up for me. But, I found a midwife who, well, I'm just so grateful to her. She, like, her principles as a midwife is very much in alignment with like what I wanted. She was very respectful. I actually thought all midwives were like that, but now, that I'm like interested in this world, I definitely see stories that I hear about, stories that are otherwise of like more invasive, like the midwife kind of deal. Yeah. So she was awesome. She, like she came to my house for all my appointments, and she was very supportive of my vision for my birth. And I was very chill. Like my priority was my stress is low. And I think that's the best thing that I could do for this pregnancy and for my baby. And I did actually, I can't remember how many weeks I was. It was pretty early on. I was like feeling around, and I could feel something. And, it was my first time being pregnant. So I was like, oh, is this like my uterus doing things? Well, it turned out to be a fibroid, which I didn't know anything about fibroids. And my family has the history of cancer, and I had a benign tumor in high school. So, and this actually, it was early on, because this was before my OB dropped me for choosing home birth, because they don't do concurrent care. which I was like, okay, I guess I'm not your patient anymore. This is what I'm doing. But anyway, I was in the office and, it was COVID time. So my partner couldn't be there with me. So I'm in the office by myself. He's waiting in the car. And this was actually the appointment that I told them that I was having a home birth. And so she was like, well, do you even want to have this appointment? I was like, yes, I'm here. It was so exactly what you would think, So, and I was like, hey, I've been feeling this thing. Like, what is this? And she's like, oh, that's not normal. That's like a mass of some sort. And I was like, what? Because I already had like all that trauma from like my medical history and my mom being a cancer survivor and all this stuff. And so like that really rocked me. And it was kind of like, fortunately I was able to get in and get like sonogram that day. And the tech, I was like, hey, like, I know you can't officially tell me what's up, but can you like tell me what's up? And she was like, hey, it looks like a fibroid. These are usually benign. We'll definitely get the reports to the doctor to look at it and stuff. But so fortunately, like that freak out was resolved pretty swiftly. That was like the only real stressful, like, oh shit, is something wrong with me? Part of my pregnancy. And other than that, my pregnancy was like very normal, very chill. I really was meditating on like my body is built for this. I really was committed to a non-medicated birthing experience. I wanted to feel it all, I have a pretty high pain tolerance, and I just I subscribe to experiencing life. And so that's what I wanted, And like I said, I found a midwife, and also my doula was like an angel sent to my life.
Yeah.
Like honestly, my midwife didn't really do much because my doula, like I could have birthed that child, just me and the doula. And my partner was there. He was an emotional mess. I was like, bro, you're not pushing this, like what's going on? But red flag. No, just kidding. But I'm sure my midwife would have been maybe more of that role. But I'm just like such a huge fan of who my doula was for me. She was so intuitive, and she really she had such a wonderful way of coaching me around contractions and really framing them. And even our prep sessions, I was like, oh, you're like an emotional coach for birth. Like this is badass. I'm like, you're here for me, like it was clear my midwife was there for me too, but me and the baby. And like, just like we all know that once the baby's here, it's like, how's your baby? How's your baby? And like, wait, but I also am having an experience. Yeah. So yeah, my baby actually, then my birth itself, was really like the birth of my dreams. Like it went, as smoothly as it could go. The only thing was actually he like came a bit early, which I had intuitively kind of felt that was going to happen, even though they're like, oh, first babies always cook longer, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I don't know. And then I have another friend who's very intuitive, and she put her hands on me and she was like, I think he's coming sooner than later. And I was like, I think that also. And so he came 3 weeks early, which, thank God it wasn't any more than that, because in California, you can only have midwives have that window that they're licensed to be present at a home birth. And I really, really, really did not want to go to the hospital. And so, my water broke at like 2 a.m. and I was like, whoa, okay, is this happening? And, I had been kind of coached to, or I think I heard it on a podcast that like, they were like, don't tell your partner right away because they're going to go into freak out mode, and like let them sleep and just like have that time, that sacred time where it's just like you knowing what's happening. Plus it was like 2 a.m. So, and he's a little bitch when he doesn't sleep, my ex. So I just know, I was like, well, let him sleep. And I like got up, I took a shower, and I was like, cool, well, if this is going to happen, let me eat something. I ate like a fat burrito and then like immediately puked it up.
Oh no.
I was like, oh shoot, that was not the right call, I guess. I had like my first contraction about a half an hour after my water broke. And, it was my first ever contraction ever. And so I was like, whoa, like that's different. It felt like a period cramp, like an intense period cramp. And it was not, it definitely got more intense as the day progressed. But for the first half, it was very chill. Like my contractions were like 20-30 minutes apart until about like 11, 12. And, like we put on some vibey music. I got the like my diffusers going. I got my smells going. We started inflating the birthing tub and stuff. And my midwife was actually already scheduled to come to the house for a checkup. So she came at like 10, and she, at first she was like, when I called her, because I ended up calling her at like 6 a.m. just to be like, yo, this is what's happening. And she was like, hey, as long as the fluid's clear and not like brown, like you're good. Like your baby's good size, even though it's early. And I put that in quotes for those of you who are listening because of the guest date whole thing. She's like, everything looks good. Everything's been looking good. She checked his heart rate and everything was cool. So she's like, give me a call when it's like the 155 or 115.
Yeah.
Like contractions are 5 minutes apart for lasting 1 minute and have sustained that for an hour. And so that was around, I think around 4 or 5. That's when that had progressed. And I think my birth, like they showed up around like 6, like my doula and midwife, and my midwife also had like a student shadowing her. And then my partner was there, and then my parents ended up being there. And I had told my parents, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to want you guys there or not, but they ended up being there, and it was just a really special thing to share with them. So yeah, contractions, and then I think, so I'm actually kind of unclear. Is active labor when you're like, okay, it's time to push?
Yeah.
Like, is that the definition of active labor? Anyway, whatever. There was like,
I'm not sure.
my midwife was awesome. She trusts the like physiological process of birth.
Yeah.
And there was no pushing coaching or even breathing coaching. The only coaching that was happening was my midwife, or not my doula. She was like, if you imagine your contractions as like a wave, and I'm a surfer, so this really worked for me. She was like, you can climb to the crest of the wave and then just think about like riding it down the other side. And that was like, I was like, I can do that. We're good for that.
That's kind of funny People like say grief is a wave. That's like how I always look at my grief.
Yes. Yeah. Grief is definitely not linear. So I did the classic, like sitting on the toilet backwards was the most comfortable position. I did get in the tub for a little while. And then I like got overheated and I intuitively felt like, I'm going to need gravity. I ended up, so I ended up birthing my son. So I probably had like, I got that sensation to push. And this is the thing I always share with people who are going for unmedicated birth, women who are going for unmedicated birth, is there's so much talk about like, oh, the ring of fire and when I had that sensation of pushing, I was like, okay, we're near the end. So like, I got this. And number two, I was able to become an active participant with my body again, instead of contractions, which the contractions is just like full surrender. They are happening to you is what it feels like. Even though I know it's like your body doing the thing to get your baby here. I actually felt relief when that sensation to push came through, because I was like, oh, and now I've got something to do. I have like some power to flex here.
Yeah. That's a good perspective.
So yeah, I pushed. Time is weird. So I can't tell you. It felt like I pushed for maybe like 20 minutes. And there was like a few big, like, okay, we're doing this. Okay, we're doing this. And then the third one, this is the thing that my midwife kept telling me, reach in there, can you feel his head? And so I would like toward that end, I was able to be like, my middle finger is like halfway up and I can feel my baby's head. And I was like, oh my God. And I caught my baby. I was able to be the first person to lay hands on my child. And that was like so flippant, empowering and spiritual and holy shit. And like the way that, it was like the one push, the head came out, that it was like, okay, let me chill. The second push, everything else kind of flopped out. And I have a video of it where it's just like, I'm holding my baby and I look at the camera and it's just that like pure awe of like the miracle of birth, and like, I was like, holy shit, I freaking did that. And, in my video, my baby daddy is like crying. He is useless. Actually, at the end, I like grabbed onto him. I was like, you did this to me. I was like, you take my friggin' squeezes. And he was fine. He was fine. We were in love and whatever. That shortly all fell apart. So yeah, like I said, my birthing experience itself was chef's kiss. And so powerful and really opened something up in me. And, placenta came out. I actually had I forget what they call it. Something insertion where the umbilical cord is like embedded in the placenta, or not the placenta, the sac. Which is actually like a really high risk thing. And so, I'm grateful that they didn't see that. Like, I did do a 20-week scan just to make sure like all the organs were good and shit. And, cause had they seen that, I probably would have been flagged as high risk and been pressured to have a hospital birth. And thankfully, my midwife was there checking the heart rate and stuff, and heart rate was good. Like everything was good until that placenta came out. And my midwife and her student was like, oh, they were like, can we photograph this and send it to like the birth nerds that we know? Cause this is like wild, you know? So anyway, that was like the only really like, aside from the postpartum experience I'm about to get into, that was the only like really exceptional thing about, my birth. And, yeah, we were just in like baby bliss town for a couple of weeks. Now looking back on it, a couple of things that I want to share with the audience to kind of set the context. So, spoiler alert, I experienced postpartum psychosis, and first of all, there's a range of what people experience when they experience postpartum psychosis. The definition of psychosis is like a detachment from reality. It involves hallucinations, paranoia, mania, and like how it felt to me, it was like this surge of energy. And I actually have had one other experience of psychosis in my life that was like trauma induced. I was 31 years old. So this was like 5 years prior to, or 4 years prior to this one happening. And when I went through that experience, there was like a very big spiritual component both times. I think Western psychology framework it only captures a part of what occurs in people. And I feel like this birth like blew me open for this spiritual surge that manifested I relate to it best as like a spiritual psychosis. And my hormones were all over the place. So let me just back up. At about 7 weeks. No, yeah. Just before 7 weeks postpartum, my first symptoms were racing thoughts. Both times I experienced this, I had this there was like this urgency I felt like I was tapped into spirit, and I was getting like all these downloads of wisdom, and I needed to write them down. So I had this like incessant writing, and so much so that like I would lay down to go to sleep. I was like, oh, I need to write that one down too. So there was the racing thoughts, the need to write them down. There was loss of appetite, is feeling so energized that I felt like I didn't have to eat. I felt like I didn't have to sleep. So that kind of hit on a Thursday that was starting to show up. I think I may have slept a little bit Thursday night. And plus, like, your sleep is all over the place because you're breastfeeding and you're new momming and all of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, what I was going to add is that I think right after my birth, I was experiencing what I've heard called like hypomania, where it's like, I just felt high on this experience. It was so freaking powerful. I'm an out loud processor, and I just was like, dude, who can come over to talk so I could talk about this incredible experience that I just had. And so, so I do think that like had showed up a little like earlier. I know that I've heard some women experience the psychosis immediately, like one day or like the day of the baby is born. So like I said, there's a spectrum of experience out there. And So anyway, Friday like was when the real like paranoia and ooh, like like thoughts where like I can sit here now today and be like, yeah, that was a little out there. But, I've already told you, like, I had a home birth because I don't trust the medical industrial complex, especially around birth. And so then experiencing this really powerful birthing experience and being someone that I really truly am here for women. I always have been, I've always, and so then having this like connection of like, holy shit, this is what women are robbed of in so many, like in more often than not, women are being traumatized during their birth. And I did not experience trauma during my birth. Postpartum, however, it's a whole nother story. But so that was like a part of this energy that I was experiencing. And it was kind of like, oh my God, like the fuckery is even bigger than I thought. And then you start seeing it like everywhere. Plus, y'all know this is like COVID time. So like the schmack were getting like pushed, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like I totally was like enveloped in the bigness of everything that I was seeing. And that was all a part of what was going on. Right. So like part of my paranoia was like, big pharma's on to me. Like, am I a target now? And of course, like, it doesn't make sense when you're in like psychosis land. It wasn't like I was really blasting this on social media or had a big, like it was. So that's the part where I'm like, all right, chill out, but that all of that was very real to me. And so like Friday, Saturday, we ended up spending the night at my parents' house because like my partner was like, what's going on? My family was like, oh, this is kind of like what happened 4 years ago. And like, that was like a really scary experience for everybody. And so everybody's fear was activated. And the way that my partner and my mom's fear shows up is really in like control. And one of the things that is just of my essence is like freedom. And when, especially in this state, there's kind of this like, I'm untouchable and don't tell me what to do, like even more amplified. So the combo of those things was real tough on everybody. My dad, fortunately, is somebody that is like a grounding force just in general in my life. And like, especially when I'm like going through it, like he's somebody that I'm like, you're cool to be around me. That it works. It's fine. Anyway, so like I spent the night at my parents' house, maybe Saturday and Sunday. And like things got wacky on my end. Like I was like, oh, I'm an oracle. I was like tapped straight into God. I had what I would describe as like a Kundalini release, like my entire body. It was like electricity was going through my body. And I also experienced this back the first time when I was 31. And it also, I'm a movement specialist, and I had been really like looking at like movement and trauma and like that whole relationship. And I know that shaking and vibration is trauma release. And so at one point it felt like my body was releasing like all the sexual trauma of my ancestors. Like it really was like clear that that's what was happening. And it was super intense. And it was like very much like, I was like, am I going to get through this? And of course, okay, also for context, my the father of my child was raised Christian, and his fear really activated all of that deep programming. And so, I'm over here burning sage and like salting the windows and shit, which like he knows there was no lies. Like I always told him who I was. I was raised atheist, and I've like have this really unconventional pathway to spirit, but I'm very spiritual. And so we would have conversations like, yeah, we fundamentally believe in the same thing. You have that language, I have this language. And when all this started happening, like it really freaked him out, and like his deep programming like came out to play. And like at one point he was like, well, if you just took Jesus Christ as your one and only, none of this would be happening, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like in the throes of my own experience, I was also being like berated like that by my person at the time, So anyway, back to Sunday night. Like I said, things were wild at this point on my end, like totally hallucinating, all kinds of stuff. Monday morning, I got up and I was just like, I need to get to the beach. I need to go run around on the beach naked. I need to get my ass in the ocean. Like I just knew, like I was overheating. And, my mom was freaked out. The previous time this happened, acupuncture was something that got me back into my body, but it was like after the surge. And I believe in acupuncture, but she was like, no, we need to get you to the like for her, that was like the fix, right? And so I was like, okay, fine. If that's what's going to get me to the beach, let's do it. I don't know if either of you have experienced mania or if anybody listening has experienced mania, but like, it's like a huge adrenaline rush. And so if you've experienced adrenaline, you probably know that like sitting still is not the thing. And like I sitting there, I let her put in all the needles, and I couldn't tell you if it was 30 seconds or 5 minutes, but it felt like forever. And I was like, these things aren't working. I ripped all of them out. And I was like, let's go. We're out of here. Mm-hmm. And just like made a big scene. And then, it just was like taking forever. I woke up in the morning asking to go to the beach, and then it was the afternoon. And apparently we were back at the house getting ready to go to the beach. But I was like, y'all are taking too long. And also there's like I just like to be naked anyway. And then combined with this, like, I am woman, hear me roar. I'm untouchable, hear me roar. I thought it was a great idea to get my ass to the water, butt naked. And the house that I was at is close to the bay. But it's across like the tourist strip of the Embarcadero. And so at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I walked my naked ass across the way, jumped in the water, like got the relief that I needed. And then I was just like, no shame, walking back, it was like right by the Harbor Patrol. All these guys that I surf with, they're like, yo, what is going on? And like, my friend Marcos and my dad like walked me back to my house. And I was like, cool, I'm good to chill. As soon as I got to the house, there was a cop car there. And they were like, no, we need to talk to you. I was like, I don't need to talk to you. I'm good. I just need, like, I live here. Like, I just need to go home. And then one of them grabbed me. And as soon as they put hands on me, I freaked the fuck out. And, I have a background in jujitsu, and like, I have knowledge of how to get out of holds. And that compiled with like mania strength and like mama bear strength it took 5 people to get me handcuffed, but they handcuffed me and threw me in the back of the cop car naked. And, the ambulance was there, and and then nobody was, I didn't know where my son was. It turns out my mom had taken my son, which was like the best move to make. But I was like, nobody was talking to me about what was going on. So I'm just like sitting overheating, handcuffed in the back of this cop car. And then they had, they like decided that I was too unruly to be medically evaluated there. And so they sent me, in the cop car to the hospital, which is like 20 minutes away. And I'm wild. I'm talking shit to this police officer. I am like on one. And they take me out of the car. I'm still handcuffed. I'm still a fucking beast. And I'm like pushing, like I'm kicking the nurses. Anyway, it was out of control. I was out of control. I remember them sticking me with like 6 fucking needles of sedatives before I passed out. So this was all traumatizing, this was all, but and then from that point on, I was like in the system. I ended up, being put on an involuntary hold of 5150. I was sedated. And when I came to, I was like back in my body. And like, I remember everything. I remember everything. I can tell you that a mental health facility isn't where I needed to be, away from my child. And so that was like a 5-day experience. They ended up releasing me like that Saturday, 5 or 6 day. And I came home. I was still running pretty hot. That week, my partner was like, I want a divorce. I'm sure I married the wrong woman. We had been married for 6 months. I was like, what are you even talking about?
Thank you so much for listening to part 1 of Shawna's story. We'll be back next week for part 2. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion and found it insightful and beneficial. Remember, the Golden Hour Birth Podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you. If you appreciate the content we bring you each week, consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform or sharing the show with your friends and family. Your support helps us reach more people and continue creating valuable episodes. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us on our website, www.goldenhourbirthpodcast, or connect with us on social media. We value your feedback and want to make sure that we're delivering the content you want to hear. Before we sign off, we'd like to express our gratitude to our incredible guests who joined us today. We are honored that they trust us enough to be so open and vulnerable. We're grateful for their time and willingness to share their stories with us. If you're interested in taking the conversation further with us, join us on our Facebook group, The Golden Hour Birth Circle. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode, so be sure to tune in. Until then, stay golden and remember to take care of yourself. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. Bye!